JonBenet Ramsey, the little girl in Colorado, was murdered.
Beauty queen JonBenet. JonBenet's murder has frightened residents of Boulder. The murder of JonBenet Ramsey really is, right now in this country, the most infamous cold case.
What'd you get, JonBenet? Oh.
People want to know who killed JonBenet Ramsey. There is so much mystery surrounding JonBenet's murder, and it's lasted nearly a quarter of a century.
The reason I think it continues to resonate is because we just don't know what happened.
She was a spark plug in our family. That's how I looked at her. She kept things alive and going.
She was a ball of fire. She was always very caring and spiritual. She could stand on her head. She could hula hoop. She could rollerblade. And she just recently learned how to climb a rock wall.
She was a 6-year-old girl, somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, and she was taken from us in a very violent way.
I think the fascination for this case endures because we still don't know who killed this little girl.
We want to know what happened to JonBenet. We want justice for JonBenet. That's why the case endures.
Until the day we die, we'll be looking for the person that murdered our daughter.
In 1996, a little girl named JonBenet Ramsey was 6 years old.
She was brutally assaulted and murdered on Christmas night in the basement of her home in Boulder, Colorado. Hey guys, welcome to our first ever podcast episode. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Jessa.
And I'm Lexi.
And we're sisters.
I think there's a new generation who's into the JonBenet Ramsey case who were her age and were told to stay inside by their parents when she was murdered.
I think, yeah, growing up it scared me a little bit because we were the same age and, you know, same state and blonde hair, blue eye, you know, it was a little bit scary.
I remember thinking that I could not believe that this happened like so close to our home. You think that your home is safe, that this place is safe, and you just don't think that it could have happened here, and it did.
The murder took place sometime between 10 p.m. on December 25th and 5:30 a.m. on December 26th, 1996.
They know a lot about the case. My 2 girls, they loved their grandfather.
Our grandfather was a detective on one of the biggest unsolved murders in our generation, the JonBenet Ramsey murder. And with this podcast, we want to talk about the JonBenet Ramsey case from our grandfather, Lou Smith's perspective.
Lou Smith was a really legendary detective from Colorado that was brought in early to investigate the homicide.
Once he got a hold of a case, he never let go, and he had great attention to detail.
Lou Smith made an 8-hour video presentation that includes notes on the case, potential suspects, the evidence he collected over the years. It's a virtual encyclopedia of the JonBenet Ramsey case.
My name is Lou Smith. I'm a retired homicide detective from the Colorado Springs Police Department, and I have worked the Ramsey case now for approximately 10 years. What I'm going to do today is to just show a presentation that was made back in 1998.
He had a history of closing cases. He had a 90% success rate.
He advocated for the victim and stood in their shoes.
So that's why we've chosen The Victim's Shoes as our podcast name. This really meant something to him, and he really felt he needed to find the killer of this little girl, and he needed to do that for JonBenet.
And first and foremost, we wanted to continue our grandpa's legacy. That was one thing he asked for before he died. He wants the case to remain alive.
There's a saying here in Colorado that Boulder is 30 square miles of fantasy surrounded by reality.
It's very wealthy, it's well-to-do. Boulder looked like something out of a storybook in many ways, especially the neighborhood in which the Ramseys lived.
John and Patsy Ramsey lived in a 6,700 square feet Tudor there on 15th Street.
What I'd like to do first is to just talk a little bit about the Ramsey family. John Ramsey had interest in sailing and flying. Patsy Ramsey was the mother.
John and Patsy Ramsey had 2 children together. Their firstborn was Burke, 9 years old, and JonBenet, 6 and a half, in kindergarten.
I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a wife and a mother. John used to tell people that I invested in futures, the futures of my children. That's how I usually answer my occupation.
My name is John Andrew Ramsey. JonBenet's half-brother. JonBenet would go around and ask everybody how their day was and what they did, and he was just an energetic and fun kid.
By all accounts, they were a happy couple. Patsy was a high society woman from Atlanta. John was a smart guy who had just been nominated or voted as Entrepreneur of the Year.
Patsy Ramsey was a stylish woman. She was a former beauty queen, Miss West Virginia.
Oh, that is interesting because the case had gained so much attention because JonBenet was in pageants.
By the time JonBenet was 4 years old, she was in the pageant system with big hair and lots of makeup.
I think it starts with the video of JonBenet. It starts with the fact that you have this beauty pageant video of a 6-year-old. That is where this starts, is people start saying, what's that about? How could that have played in?
I think it also touches on parents who have young kids, like, could this happen to me?
I really believe that if we hadn't seen the beauty pageant photos of JonBenet Ramsey, it might have just gone into the ether as another child murder. Hundreds of children are murdered in America every year. But this one captivated us because we saw the beauty pageant pictures.
Hello, I'm Patsy Ramsey. This is JonBenet. She's 4, Burke is 7.
Well, Christmas seemed to be kind of a crescendo for our family. It just became this moment that we all look forward to, and it's a day of peace and quiet.
Christmas was Patsy's favorite time, and she really went all out. She had a Christmas tree for every room, and every tree had a theme. The windows were done with garland, the staircases had garland, there were red ribbons everywhere.
Everything was about entertaining, and she loved people. She loved to make people feel good.
And from all of us at our house to everyone at your house, Merry Christmas and the happiest of New Year's.
There was plenty to celebrate in the Ramsey home. Patsy Ramsey had recently been declared clear of this ovarian cancer that she had battled. And that was a huge relief to come back from stage 4 cancer. Plenty to celebrate that Christmas.
So on Christmas Day, the Ramsey family opened presents at their home that morning. Patsy made pancakes, JonBenet rode her bike around on the patio, and both JonBenet and Burke had friends over to play that morning.
The kids went outside to play with their friends with their new presents. They were going to a friend's house for dinner that night.
We were going to leave early the next morning for a trip to our summer cottage in Michigan. It was going to be the first time we'd gotten all of our family together in Michigan for kind of a post-Christmas celebration. So we came home, went to bed. JonBenet was asleep when we arrived home. We took her to bed, got Burke to bed, set the alarm, and went to sleep.
The next morning, Patsy was up first.
You get up, you're dressed, what happens?
I went down our steps from our bedroom to the 2nd floor. Then I started walking down the spiral staircase. And as I came to the bottom of the stairs, there were 3 pages neatly laid across one of the runs of the stairway.
She picked up the note and she started to read it.
I just remember when I read, "We have your daughter," it just, this overwhelming fear.
And then?
Then I just screamed for John, screamed.
We were kidnapping. Hurry, please. Explain to me what's going on. What's your name? Are you Patsy Ramsey? I'm the mother. Oh my God!
I was the call taker that night shift when the call came in.
Police, what's going on? 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please. Explain to me what's going on, okay? There's a note left and our daughter's gone. There's a ransom note here. It's a ransom note? Oh my God! Please.
She's hysterical, and she says there's a kidnapping.
Please.
I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been gone?
No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
The note said, if you do anything, if police come, if FBI come, your daughter will die. You called 911.
Yes, I did. I had to do something. I had to take action.
And I mean, all this happened in a matter of moments.
Patsy calls 911 at 5:52 a.m. and the first officer arrives at 5:55.
Wow, that's fast.
I know, that's really fast. More friends start to arrive and more officers start to arrive. So at this point, lots of people are at the house.
We called friends for help at that point. Your daughter is gone.
Desperate.
She's in the hands of a madman.
My phone rang. Pam, they've got her. What do you mean they've got her? They've kidnapped JonBenet. She's gone.
What was the atmosphere like as you sat and waited?
Well, it was awful. First of all, we didn't know whether the kidnapper was going to call that day because the note said, I will call you tomorrow. Get plenty of rest. I was deathly afraid that tomorrow was in fact the 27th.
You lose all perception of time, of place. You've just been dealt a horrible, crushing blow.
The police came in just before 6 o'clock in the morning on the 26th of December, thinking that we had a missing child. They go into this beautiful house with 18 or so rooms.
And they did a cursory search of the residence, and they didn't find anything.
The mistakes they made were outrageous, they were mystifying, they were mistake after mistake after mistake.
The police did a terrible, terrible job securing that scene. And if you don't secure the scene, you don't get good evidence. People were streaming through that house. They were in the kitchen, they were in the living room. There were some friends of Patsy's that were helping her wipe up the kitchen. There could have been fingerprints there.
You had friends that were Windexing the sink and washing dishes. And
People were making toast in the kitchen. And yes, a kidnapping is a crime scene, but we were so focused on getting JonBenet back. That was the task.
What we have learned is that everyone should have been sequestered into an area so that people weren't roaming around the house.
And that was a mistake on my part. The reason I didn't is because these people were the Ramsey's support system. There was no information at all to indicate the family was involved at that point.
It was a crime scene, and it was getting contaminated. The note was being passed around and reviewed by all of their friends.
Of all of the evidence left behind, that ransom note is the most baffling. Number one, it is too damn long. A ransom note is not that long. A ransom note says, I have your child, I want $1 million, I'll call you later.
This is the infamous ransom note. It begins,
Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully.
It was 3 pages long, and some people believe that a kidnapper that was truly kidnapping somebody would have written a very direct and to-the-point ransom note.
3 pages? What was that about?
That ransom note was the War and Peace of ransom notes.
Who would write a 3-page rambling ransom note other than someone trying to cover their tracks who was in the house?
It's the weirdest ransom note I've ever read.
You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills.
You think about this number and how is it relevant? And it's relevant because John Ramsey got a bonus from his company for $118,000. How many people knew that? I'm going to guess not a lot of people.
our grandpa compared the note to some examples that he found in movies.
John? The movie Ransom was playing in Boulder.
I have your son.
Oh, Jesus.
I want $2 million.
Oh, God.
In that particular movie, a fat cat industrialist, his son was kidnapped. There's a lot of the same verbiage in this note as was in even the note that was written in that particular movie.
If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies.
If you talk to anyone, I don't care if it's a Pekingese pissing against a lamppost, the girl dies.
You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John.
Do not attempt to grow a brain.
Our guy's a real watcher of that particular type of movies.
Dan, what does this tell you in terms of evidence?
First of all, that someone felt comfortable spending the time writing this long note in the house.
And whoever wrote the note is about to go from a kidnapping suspect to a murder suspect.
The ransom note had indicated there would be a call between 8 and 10 a.m.
And the police had prepped me on how to respond on a phone call, and it's very important that you hear JonBenet's voice.
Police officers were leaving at 9:30 and 9:45 before that time period of the phone call had even expired. One lone detective was left on the scene.
Detective Linda Arndt is left behind in the house with John and Patsy Ramsey.
She didn't have extensive homicide experience managing a kidnapping and what was about to unfold. This was likely pretty overwhelming for one lone police officer.
Everyone is cleared but the family friends, victim advocates, and the detective.
So nobody was cleared.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me because everyone should be cleared from the scene.
The house is full of people. And so this is a crime scene that is now being destroyed piece by piece.
I was praying. Linda Arndt had said to me, we're hopeful that the kidnappers will just drop JonBenet off someplace. And I kept looking out the window, clutching this cross and just imagining that she was going to come running down the street.
They're waiting for a telephone call from the kidnapper. What's going to happen next?
10 o'clock comes and goes, and there's no acknowledgement that the deadline imposed by the author of the ransom note is come and gone.
Nobody seemed to mark it or freak out about it. She noticed John Ramsey checking his mail in the kitchen and thought that was odd.
Linda Arndt tells the restless John, why don't you look around the house, see if anything is missing or looks strange.
Check the house, top to bottom. Look for anything that might belong to JonBenet that is in place where it shouldn't be.
John took a friend with him. They went to the basement, and John opened the door.
You opened the door to the small room.
I knew instantly what I'd found. I'd found my daughter. She was lying on a white blanket. The blanket was wrapped around her. Her hands were tied above her head. She had tape over her mouth. I immediately knelt down over her, felt her cheek, took the tape off immediately off her mouth. I tried to untie the cord that was around her arms. I couldn't get the knot untied. Picked her up, and I ran upstairs and laid her on the floor and still had a hope that she was alive.
And I see John Ramsey carrying JonBenet up the last 3 steps from the basement. She looked like she was sleeping. She had some marks on her face and on her neck. I knelt next to her and I leaned down to her face. And John leaned down opposite and he asked if she was dead. And I said, yes, she's dead. And as we looked at each other, I remember, and I wore a shoulder holster, tucking my gun right next to me and consciously counting, I've got 18 bullets.
Why did you do that?
Because I didn't know if we'd all be alive when people showed up.
She clearly felt in danger. At that moment, she made it clear that she thought that John Ramsey killed his daughter and that they might kill her. It was shocking to me that she would think that.
How is it that you have all these cops searching a home and nobody finds the body, but you ask John Ramsey to go look for things out of the ordinary, and he finds his daughter in a room that had never been opened by anybody in law enforcement? That's crazy.
He lays her on the living room floor where just a few minutes before, friends and neighbors have been walking and, you know, bringing in fibers and whatever to contaminate the scene. And then the coup de grace. He grabs a blanket, which is full of who knows what kind of contaminants, and throws it over the body.
Patsy was being kept out of the room, and I didn't want Patsy to see JonBenet laying there like that.
I remember walking in and seeing her lying there in front of the Christmas tree. I knelt down over her and just laid my body on her body and my cheek against her cheek, and it was cold. And Father Raw was there. And he started saying the last rites, I believe. And I just kept saying, no, no, you know, ask God. Ask God to raise her.
So the kidnapping of JonBenet has turned into the murder of JonBenet.
JonBenet Ramsey was murdered in a horrific way, many injuries to this little girl's body.
We have the x-ray of her skull, which shows a fracture, a massive one.
Right. This is an 8-inch skull fracture. So we're talking a major blunt force. This is just a massive blow.
But the ultimate cause of death was strangulation with something called a garrote.
Brad, what type of a weapon is a garrote? How does it work?
It's a device of string, and it's wrapped around what ends up being a piece of a paintbrush. And what happens is, as JonBenet is losing consciousness, she's leaning forward. And so this gets tighter and tighter, and you can see how it cuts into my hand. You can see exactly why it cut into her neck. And that ultimately, according to the ME, is what killed her.
It seems to me that she had been attempting to remove the ligature from around her neck. And that tells me she was alive when she was garroted.
There were signs that JonBenet had also been sexually abused. The broken pieces of the paintbrush that were used for the garrote were also used to sexually assault her.
What does it tell you about the murderer? Just how vicious and awful this death was for her.
A person that would do this to a 6-year-old in this fashion clearly is into sort of sadistic behavior, that they like torture to a certain extent. This is clearly somebody who was really into this.
And was here with the intent to kill.
There was no evidence of a break-in. There was no jimmying on the front door. There were 4 people in that house, and 1 died overnight. From the very beginning, they suspected the parents.
Within minutes of JonBenet's body being found, this was who they were going to go after, and that's what they did.
The police are thinking, we got to talk to those parents, and we got to talk to them right now before they start getting their story straight together.
They brought JonBenet's body out past the candy canes that were decorating the front of the house, and there were only like 2 reporters outside to capture that. And then The storm happened.
JonBenet Ramsey, the little girl in Colorado, was murdered.
Beauty queen JonBenet. JonBenet's murder has frightened residents of Boulder.
News outlets from around the world had descended upon Boulder and were just hiding in trees and bushes and digging through our trash, following me around town. I mean, it was war.
The JonBenet Ramsey case was completely out of control.
You also have to remember the O.J. Simpson case had wrapped up. The 24-hour news cycle, their content had dried up. And so along came the Ramsey family, and we fit right into that slot.
JonBenet Ramsey was a precocious 6-year-old. She had been strangled to death in the basement of her own home.
You have the shock, this incredibly horrendous crime. And then you have these videos that surface. Of this beautiful young girl.
JonBenet Ramsey! Dark blonde hair and green eyes.
Dancing in her costumes, and those were the first viral videos.
She'd like to become an Olympic ice skater.
It's part of what turned it into an international circus.
Now we have Instagram and we have Snapchat, but back then, this was one of the first moments in time where something truly went viral. This little girl's image was everywhere overnight.
The biggest negative factor about John and Patsy Ramsey was that they had allowed their daughter to be in child beauty pageant contests, and people did not like them.
As our grandpa stated, this was a brutal, premeditated murder, not just a little doink on the head covered up by perverted staging.
It seems unimaginable to most parents out there that any parent could do something this brutal, this heinous to their own child, and yet police found evidence from the beginning that in their minds pointed directly to the Ramseys.
Particularly, Amy, when you start with children of this age, when they die, tend to die at the hands of their parents. So the focus is naturally going to be on the parents to begin with. Now, in the house, the ransom note is written on a pad that belongs to Patsy. So this is the notepad. This location right here is where the note was physically found by Patsy. The pen that was used was in the house.
So this is the garrote that was used in the murder of JonBenet, and it's a special significance because of what it was made from.
Yes, it basically is an artist's paintbrush that's broken, and what's important is that it actually came from Patsy's art supply.
And there were even fibers on the backside of the duct tape that had been on JonBenet's mouth from Patsy's clothing.
And that was very, very important. But there are problems because Patsy lived in that house. Would those fibers have been there anyway?
The police started thinking, well, maybe this is just a cover-up, that the Ramseys harmed their child some way, then panicked and tried to create basically a kidnapping scenario.
Patsy and John should have been taken to the police station immediately for separate interviews, for examination of their body for defensive wounds, for collection of their clothing. That never happened.
At this point, they haven't interviewed the mother or father. Not surprisingly, they're still very grief-stricken. They have not been in any kind of condition to be interviewed.
A couple of days after he finds his daughter's body in the basement, police speak with John Ramsey, but this is not a formal interrogation.
My father, myself, we all marched into that police station, gave blood, we gave hair, we gave fingerprints. The thing that really stuck with me is two detectives hand me their business cards, and one says narcotics officer and the other says auto theft. And I bury my head into my hands because I knew at that point we were in a bad spot. Boulder police didn't have the resources to solve a complex homicide.
John interviewed with Boulder police. Patsy's doctor said she was too medicated and unable to get out of bed.
The police were faced with lawyers and wealthy friends, people in the community who told the police, please give them room, they're grieving, what's the matter with you?
Though the police had spoken to the Ramseys, what they really wanted to do was formally interrogate them.
The police are thinking, we gotta talk to those parents and we gotta talk to them right now before they start getting their story straight together.
Your lawyers advised you then not to submit to police questions. Why not, people say? Wouldn't you have wanted to tell them everything?
Well, I don't recall that our lawyers told us that at the time. We said, you know, yeah, we want to keep working with you, but can't you come here? We can't go out. Patsy was in bed. Patsy was barely able to move. We were perfectly willing and anxious to work with the police to find the killer. We had a higher priority at that point, and that was to bury our daughter.
The family is flying the body back to Atlanta for burial.
On New Year's Eve, JonBenet was laid to rest just outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
This service is in loving memory of JonBenet Patricia Ramsey.
We flew back to Atlanta to bury JonBenet, Atlanta being our home. Atlanta being where my oldest sister Beth is buried.
We give thanks today for JonBenet, for the love that she had for her parents.
I want to go back to the funeral.
Whatever we do, we're gonna go through it together. We may not get far, but sure as the star, wherever we are, it's together.
Wherever we are, it's together.
We sang that. She and I sang that together. We'd sing it driving in the car, and we just knew that we would always be together in everything. I wanted my children to know that I was with them through thick and thin, regardless of what happened in life. You know, unconditional love.
Oh, look at that. You can go places now.
Every murder case that I've ever done, the parents are so grief-stricken, but they sometimes make a nuisance out of themselves at the police department.
The Ramseys, literally the day after JonBenet's funeral, sit down for a television interview.
The next thing the police knew, they were on CNN.
The Boulder police don't interrogate the Ramseys, but they remain the main suspects.
Many people found the Ramseys' behavior peculiar, suspicious, weird, off balance, and from that thought, they must be guilty.
When you realized that you two were the prime suspects, what did you think? What did you feel? What did you say?
Well, we were outraged. We were shocked. How could they think that? We were a normal family.
I just didn't believe it. You just can't believe it. I mean, you were suffering from having lost our child. And then for someone to accuse you, it's just, you can't believe that would happen.
A lot of people said, you know, if that were me, I'd be on the steps of the police department finding the murderer of my daughter. Then they go on CNN and say they didn't do it.
If anyone knows anything, please help us.
We've sensed from our friends that this tragedy has touched not just ourselves and our friends, but many people.
As a mother, my heart went out to this couple.
And if I were a resident of Boulder, I will tell my friends to keep your babies close to you. There's someone out there.
But my journalistic brain said to me, this isn't right. They should be talking to the police, not the public.
Police end their 10-day search of the Ramsey house and remove the crime scene tape.
It is unknown if the family intends to resume residency at the home. We have no comment on the whereabouts of the family at this time.
Starting from the beginning of this case, we, the media, lapped up what the Boulder Police Department wanted to tell us about what they were doing in the JonBenet Ramsey case.
For the most part, the police were very tight-lipped in this thing. They didn't tell us a lot of secrets. They didn't leak a lot of information. Other than broadly, we think the mom did it.
People who believe Patsy killed their daughter believe it was over a bedwetting and then staged to look like an intruder.
The bedwetting theory was a big theory at the time. The bedwetting theory suggests that Patsy was angry with JonBenet and killed her because the bed was wet.
I'm a cancer survivor of stage 4 cancer. When you are standing on the brink of death with a terminal illness, your priorities suddenly line up. Bedwetting is totally insignificant. I love my children. I wouldn't harm them for anything in the world.
But Americans were fascinated with the possibility that the Ramseys might have done this.
What happened in that house? Did she go berserk and hurt JonBenet, by accident, not on purpose certainly? Did Burke hurt her by mistake and cause her death?
It was leaked by Boulder police that it was possible that Burke Ramsey's voice was on the 911 call that Patsy had made.
Patsy? Patsy?
The 911 operator believed that she heard an unexplained voice at the end of the 911 call.
Patsy Ramsey has put the phone down, but she hasn't hung it up. And the 911 recording continues.
I heard her say, okay, I've called the police, now what? And I thought, huh. And then I heard two people talking to her, and I heard a male voice respond, and then I heard a more faint voice respond.
Some speculated at the time that faint voice might have been Burke, but the family denied it, saying he was asleep at the time. We asked an expert to weigh in on the call.
My name is Ed Primo. I'm an audio-video forensic expert. And I was asked about what people have heard throughout the years from this 911 call. Here we go.
What's your name? Are you Patsy Ramsey? Oh my God!
So when Patsy is speaking to the operator, we could clearly see bright yellow and orange colors. And as I zoom in to the recording here, I can see the formants. This is a visual representation of sound. The brighter the color, the louder the volume.
Patsy? Patsy?
The sound changes right here, the section in question where people are hearing voices. We can see some sounds, but we don't see the formants like we saw over here. So I can't rely on those being words. There's just not enough signal-to-noise ratio in order to be able to perceive what those sounds are. They could be noise, and they could be voices. I just can't, as a scientist, arrive at a reasonable conclusion.
The Secret Service and the FBI also concluded that no additional conversation is audible.
I think we've given way too much weight on whether or not Burke Ramsey was present when Mom makes the 911 call. If Burke's voice was there, or John Ramsey's voice is there, does that mean they're the killer?
And it's important to remember that the Boulder police never considered Burke a suspect. They suspected the parents, even though the Ramseys had no history of abuse or neglect of their children.
All the evidence shows me that up until this point, they were devoted parents.
Would you get up in the middle of the night and slaughter your child? We're parents, we love our children.
There's so many puzzle pieces here that just don't fit.
Do you really think your daughter's murderer will be found?
Yes, I do, because the killer has never been pursued. An objective, wide investigation hasn't taken place. The parents have been focused on. That's all that's been done.
It might be an unknown entity then, not one of the suspects we've all been currently talking about and dissecting.
I don't think it's any of the suspects we're talking about. What we know is that just within a few mile radius of the Ramseys' home, there was approximately 38 to 40 sex offenders in that area. And the question is, have they all been completely vetted?
Was it an accident? Was it intentional, premeditated?
I want to say something to the person or persons that took this baby from us. The list of suspects narrows. Soon, there will be no one on the list but you.